Once upon a midnight Halloween, the village of Blackwood lay cloaked in mist, its narrow, winding streets silent as the grave. The villagers of Blackwood followed a peculiar tradition every Halloween, one rooted in terror rather than fun. On the night of October 31st, each household would leave a single piece of candy on their doorstep, a simple offering for something they called the Hollow Man. It was said that the Hollow Man walked from house to house at midnight, collecting his treats in silence. No one had ever seen his face, but those who'd caught a glimpse swore that he was tall and thin, with empty, hollow eyes. And if a house failed to leave candy for him, they'd awake to find a strange black stone on their doorstep, marked with ominous, cryptic symbols. The unlucky resident would then face a curse so dreadful no one dared to speak of it aloud. On this Halloween, young Emma, a bold teenager with a skeptical streak, decided to break tradition. "It's just a ridiculous superstition," she scoffed. Her little brother Sam looked up at her with wide, fearful eyes. "Please, Emma," he whispered. "What if the stories are true?" But Emma only laughed. "If the Hollow Man wants candy, he can go buy it himself," she said, defiant, as she turned off the porch light. They went to bed, Sam hiding under his blanket, whispering prayers to himself. Midnight arrived, and the village was shrouded in darkness, the silence thick and heavy. Then, Emma's room grew colder, the air sharp with a biting chill that gnawed at her bones. A soft thud sounded against her window, like fingers drumming lightly on the glass. Slowly, heart-pounding, she glanced over and her blood ran cold. A figure loomed outside, barely illuminated by the faint moonlight. He was impossibly tall, with thin, elongated limbs that seemed to sway with a life of their own. His face was hidden, but his eyes, hollow black holes that seemed to absorb light, stared directly at her. His hand, skeletal and long, rose and tapped again on her window, his empty gaze fixed. Emma held her breath, clutching her blanket tightly, praying he would go away. She closed her eyes, counting silently, but when she opened them he was inside her room. Her scream caught in her throat as he stretched out his hand, blackened fingers curling toward her. She couldn't move, couldn't speak as he tilted his head, the hollow eyes boring into her soul. Morning finally arrived and Emma woke, drenched in cold sweat, thinking it had all been a nightmare. But when she stepped outside, there was a black stone, small and smooth, etched with twisted, ancient symbols that pulsed faintly as if alive. Sam picked it up, trembling, before Emma snatched it from him. That day, Emma began to notice strange things. Her skin grew pale, her reflection in mirrors seemed off. Shadows moved in ways they shouldn't, stretching longer and darker. And at night, her room would fill with an unbearable cold, whispers seeping from corners and shadows, murmuring her name. Her shadow twisted and writhed as if it were alive, its edges curling like fingers, reaching, waiting. The next night, she heard footsteps outside her door, light, almost skittering steps, like something dragging itself across the floor. And the voice, soft and scraping, whispered her name from beyond the door. "Emma," it called, hollow and cold. Terrified, she opened the door, only to see nothing but her own shadow, yet it looked darker, stranger, twisted into the unmistakable shape of the Hollow Man's silhouette, looming over her. In a desperate attempt to rid herself of the curse, she finally left a candy on the doorstep that night, along with an apology scribbled on a piece of paper. She barely slept, but when morning came, the candy was gone. Yet, so was her shadow. She lived without it for the rest of her days, cursed to walk the world as a creature half-formed, haunted by an empty silhouette that flickered just at the edge of her vision, a constant reminder of her mistake. And the village never forgot. Every Halloween since, Blackwood streets were lined with candies, and in the misty shadows, a figure with hollow eyes watched, waiting for any who dared to forget.